All right, good to see you guys this morning. I hope you have had a great week. I have been so excited about coming back and jumping back into the book of Ecclesiastes. We are in an Old Testament book, the book of Ecclesiastes, and this is an interesting book. It's a challenging book because this book was written over 3,000 years ago. And so to try to dive into an Old Testament book like the book of Ecclesiastes and to try to understand what the author is saying to us today is quite the challenge. But I know that you guys are up to the challenge. This is an amazing book. This is a book, as we discovered last week, that is very relevant to our day. In fact, one of the big issues, one of the big driving issues that we're going to see in this book throughout our study is this issue of the purpose of life, the meaning of life. Why are we here? What is this all about? And so this is, again, a book that we should dedicate ourselves to and study. And so we're in week 2 of this series, and the author Solomon, King Solomon, he made an assertion last week that's very important for us to understand. He said that life is meaningless. When you look at the context of what's going on under the sun, that there literally is no purpose. There is no meaning. And so when we have a view, a vantage point of looking at life under the sun, we're going to feel that. We're going to feel like there's no meaning to life. There's no purpose to life. But what Solomon does for us is he takes us from a different perspective. He don't want us to just stay focused on life under the sun. He wants us to take a couple of steps back and look at the bigger picture. And unfortunately, many people fail to do that in their lifetime. They fail to look at life from another perspective. And so Solomon is going to guide us in the area of looking at life from a heavenly perspective. Look at it from a heavenly perspective. And, as I've been really thinking about that and just pondering that whole idea, I've come across all kinds of articles and things that people have written. In fact, this past week I came across an article. Listen to the title of this article. It's entitled, "Desperately Seeking Satisfaction." I mean, that is King Solomon. That's what he is saying in the book of Ecclesiastes. He's dealing with this issue of pleasure. What brings me joy? What brings me satisfaction? And over 3,000 years ago, he wrote a book that has caused us to pursue that question. And still today, people are asking the same question. What is satisfaction? I love the caption to this article. This is the caption to the article, "Desperately Seeking Satisfaction." The caption is this: how is it we can live in this world and be unsatisfied with our lives? Find out how to use your longing to create a lasting satisfaction. How is it possible to live in this day, to live in this world, and come away dissatisfied? The author has some very intriguing ideas. I want to just read a couple of her statements in this article. She begins by saying, "These days, dissatisfaction seems to be swallowing us whole. While standing in checkout lines, having dinner in a restaurant, or waiting for coffee, I can't help but overhear the conversations around me. Most often than not, these conversations are filled with everything that's missing. We are not satisfied with our work, our lives, our bodies, or our options. We're not satisfied with the quality of our lives. And the more energy we spend trying to achieve satisfaction, the more elusive it seems to become." The more elusive satisfaction is. When we pursue it, it just vanishes. It disappears. The article continues to say, what's going on? Why are we people who enjoy the most affluent lifestyles in history so unhappy with what we have? We have a lot of things in this world that are designed to bring us happiness, that are geared to create satisfaction. But in the midst of all this stuff, we still find ourselves at the end of the day dissatisfied. This is the author's conclusion. I suspect that much of our chronic dissatisfaction, I love that phrase there, chronic dissatisfaction, originates from a lack of evolution in our desire. What in the world is that? Sometimes I kind of scratch my head and say, what's this person talking about? The evolution in our desires. So our chronic dissatisfaction is somehow connected with the lack of evolution of our desires. What is this person talking about? I believe what the author is trying to bring us to is to understand that dissatisfaction from her perspective comes from a lack of self-awareness. The reason I'm dissatisfied, according to this article, is because I don't have enough self-awareness. If I just became more aware, I could experience satisfaction. Listen to this. This is what she writes here at the end. A more comfortable home, a new job, a buff body, all of these things are important personal achievements. But they are designed, I think, to help us grow toward a still bigger desire and greater capacity. So what is it? What is this bigger desire? What is this greater capacity that we're seeking? What is it? And this is what she ultimately says. Our greatest capacity, our biggest desire is to make a difference around us in this world. That we are not cashing in, if you will, on making a difference in the world around us. Now, I don't know the writer of this article. I don't know her faith story, if she has a faith story. I don't know if she's a believer. But as she has thought about this issue of satisfaction in life, she's come to the conclusion that the reason people are not satisfied is because they're just not making a big enough mark on society. That they're not leaving their footprint, if you will, in the world around us. A couple of statements to just summarize what this author is saying. People in our day are dissatisfied. We would all agree with that. We live in a world of dissatisfaction. In fact, the author of the article says that it is chronic dissatisfaction. We are chronically dissatisfied, not just a little dissatisfaction. We have an epidemic. We have a problem. We're chronically dissatisfied. Another summary of this article is that we run after satisfaction. The more we do that, the faster it seems to disappear. I was just struck as I read that line at how connected with Solomon that idea is. Solomon said this idea of running after satisfaction, he says the more we do it, the more we realize it is just a vapor. Remember the word that he used last week? Vanity. We think of vanity, we think of someone who's kind of high on themselves, a prideful person. But the word vanity in the book of Ecclesiastes is a word that means vapor. It's fleeting, it's here and it's gone. The things that we run after to bring us satisfaction, they're like a vapor. They're here and they dissipate quickly, very much like Solomon. A third statement to characterize the summary of this article is personal achievement points us in the direction toward satisfaction. That's what she's saying. If I have achievement in life, the more achievement I have, it comes along and it guides me, it directs me toward satisfaction. And then the fourth and final thing here is that satisfaction comes when I know that I have somehow changed the world around me. When I'm convinced of that. If the world is different, then I can sit back at the end of the day, I can sit back and say, I feel satisfied. Do you think if you go through life and you change the world around you, and you reflect on the life behind you, that you say, yeah, there it is. I am satisfied. If I can simply make a difference in this world, if I can just make a difference, I can know satisfaction. Well, the book of Ecclesiastes, as I've mentioned last week, you'll see this on the screen. Ecclesiastes is about learning to live during the in-between period, the time between paradise removed and paradise restored. We had at the very beginning of the Bible the great big fall that took place. And as a result of the fall, we have paradise removed. It has been removed. But ever since the moment that it was removed, God has been actively restoring paradise. We've been moving toward that. And primarily the way we get there is through Christ. That is the only way that paradise can be restored. And so it's very important for us to understand the book of Ecclesiastes and how it fits into this issue of finding satisfaction. Now, this morning I want us to look together in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and we're going to be in the first 11 verses. Again, this is a very difficult book to work through. I love this text. It's going to speak to us greatly. Listen what the preacher, Solomon, King Solomon, had to say. He says in verse 1, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. I said of laughter, it is madness. And of pleasure, what does it accomplish? I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their lives. I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself, and I planted them in all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself, from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and the homeborn slaves. And also I possessed flocks of herds larger than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. Also I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of the kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasure of men, many concubines. Verse 9, he says, then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all the labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. Thus I considered all my achievements which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted. And behold, all was vanity. All was a vapor. It's a vapor. It vanishes. And striving after the wind. And there was no profit under the sun. This is a grandpa, he's looking back on life. Grandfather Solomon. And he's given us the wisdom that he has now gleaned from his life experience. And he begins in chapter 2 with a personal conclusion about the pursuit of satisfaction. This is his conclusion. And here we have it, and you'll see this on the screen. Here is Solomon's personal experience with pursuing satisfaction. Notice verse 1, what he says. I said to myself, come now, and I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself, and behold, it too was futility. Now I want you to underline and circle or write down a couple of things that you see from verse 1. The first thing I want you to write down or circle, underline, is the word test. So we have in verse 1, Solomon saying, I am constructing a test. I have a test that I'm going to invoke. We're going to have a test here. And this test was an interesting test. He has a life experience test. Notice the second word here is the word pleasure. He is testing to see how reliable and how real and how true pleasure can be. I want to seek satisfaction. I want to have a heart that is large. I want to enjoy the things that I have. And then the third thing here is the word I. This is a pleasure of his personal experience. This is what he's accomplished. This is what he knows. This is what he can reveal to us. He can say to us with certainty. He ran a test. It was a test that dealt with pleasure, and it was from his personal experience. And notice, you can't miss this last statement in verse 1. He said, behold all of this. He's given us his conclusion before he gives us the parameters of the test. The conclusion is, it too was futility. Everything. This test that I'm going through, my personal experience, my pursuit of satisfaction, is futility. It's a vapor. It's endless. So why is this book so important for us to study today? Why do we look at this book, the book of Ecclesiastes? I love this statement. You'll see this on the screen. In a culture that places great emphasis on leisure, luxury, financial gain, self-improvement, and material possessions, it will be increasingly countercultural for Christians to work diligently, live simply, give sacrificially, help constructively, and invest eternally. In other words, what I'm saying here, what Solomon is saying to us, is that we live in a culture that says satisfaction is this way. This is how you find satisfaction. And at the end of the day, every day we know that this is not bringing me satisfaction. But for whatever reason, we get on that treadmill of life and we think, oh, if I just did this different, if I could have done it this way, that would definitely bring me satisfaction. And so to live a gospel life, it's so contrary to what the world is saying to us. It is counterculture. It goes against the culture. And so, because I love you, I care for you, I want you to understand what Solomon is saying to us. I don't want to be a people who walks according to the rhythm of this culture. I want to be a people who walks according to the rhythm of the gospel. Remember, the book of Ecclesiastes, you'll see this, is about learning to live during the in-between period. We're in an in-between period. The time between paradise removed and paradise restored. Something happened, Genesis, paradise was removed. God is restoring paradise. We're caught in the middle. How do we live? What does life look like? What did Solomon seek? What did he do to seek satisfaction in this life? This passage answers that question for us. And again, this is a book that was written over 3,000 years ago. And this is his pursuit. And interestingly, although it was a pursuit of 3,000 years ago, the very devices that he used are going to sound very familiar to our world today. Notice, seeking satisfaction. About 7 things here I want you to see. The first thing is laughter. He thought about laughter, and he says, laughter is going to bring me satisfaction. Look what he says in verse 2. I said of laughter, it is madness. Madness. It is madness. And of pleasure, what does it accomplish? There's nothing wrong with laughter. Laughter is a great device. You know, we need to learn how to laugh at ourselves. We need to learn how to laugh at the world around us. We need to not take things so serious. But for Solomon, he's saying that this was a pursuit of satisfaction. That if I could just go through life in kind of the comedy zone, just laugh at everything, then I'm going to find happiness. And he says, no, it's madness. It's not satisfying. It is temporal. When we laugh, it has a beginning and it has an end. And it's mindless. The second device that he uses here, identified in verse 3, is the device of alcohol. Look what he says. He says, I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their lives. So he's admittedly standing up and he's saying, one of the devices that I used in life was the device of alcohol. I used wine to try to stimulate my body. Now this is a very controversial verse, verse 3. And the controversy is not so much about you have someone who is drinking alcohol that's in the Bible. That's not really the controversy, although for some people that may be a point of contention. But he says, I'm stimulating my mind. So when people read this, they think, well, what he's talking about is he's talking about these alcohol binges, that he's just going out and just partying it up, getting drunk. And I don't think that's what he's saying here. He says, I have a refined taste. I have a taste, and I appreciate the good things. And I'm going to see if this can bring me a level of satisfaction. I don't think he's partying it up here in this verse, because we know that he says, while my mind was guiding me wisely, that if you're partying it up, there's no way your mind is guiding you wisely. That's not possible. Although there are many drunks who think that they're being guided wisely and they want to tell everybody else about it, that's not the case. Solomon is not asserting that. He's saying that it's a fine thing here, and I want to just sit back and I want to enjoy. I want to stimulate my body with this. Now, the third thing he points to is construction projects. Now, I love this one. Construction projects. Notice verses 4 through 6. He says, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself, and I planted them and all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. Now, this is a very important verse. Remember, we're talking about King Solomon here, and one of his characteristics is that he's a very wise man. He asked that God would give him wisdom. Give me wisdom. And Solomon was a very wise man. He was a king. He had everything that he could possibly want. And I want you to notice the words that end with S. I enlarged my works. I built houses, not just a house. He had multiple houses. Planted vineyards, many vineyards, not just a vineyard, but many vineyards. I made gardens and parks. I mean, that's like way beyond us at this point, right? Like maybe in your lifetime you could build a house. This guy's building houses. He's planting vineyards. He's creating ponds, gardens, parks, all kinds of fruit trees. And the interesting thing there in verse 6, he says, I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. Now, the thing that you need to know is that in this culture, it's a very arid, very dry culture. It's a desert world. But this guy, 3,000 years ago, had figured out how to create ponds that would irrigate the forest around him. And that was a very important thing, because if you can have trees, you can build. You can construct. So this guy, King Solomon, had the ability to do that. He says, at the end of the day, I did all this stuff. I tried to bring a level of satisfaction to my life through construction projects. Do you realize that it took Solomon 7 years to build the temple? He had 150,000 people helping him. 150,000 people building the temple. It took him 7 years. Ironically, it took him 13 years to build his own house. He doubled the amount of time in building his house. 7 years to build the temple. 13 years to build his house. So here we have a guy that says, I tried construction projects and they just did not work. Notice number 4 here. He says, this issue of servants. He says, I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves as well. So this guy has slaves. He has all kinds of people that are working for him. Whatever he needs, whatever he wants, they're there. Solomon had, we know, 35,000 slaves. 35,000. So ones that he had bought, ones that had been born in the homestead, 35,000 slaves. They're there at your beck and call. What do you want? What do you need? How can I serve you? What do you need me to do? Do you need me to go and take care of the irrigation system? Do you need me to go tend to the ponds? What do you need me to do? They're there at his beck and call. Notice also, he says he had animals. Obviously, if he's got all these people, he's got to have animals, right? Verse 7, he says, also I possessed flocks and herds larger than all who had preceded me in Jerusalem. There's nobody that has had more animals. I used animals as a way of seeking satisfaction. I'm seeking satisfaction through animals. Number 6 here is this idea of wealth. He finally gets to it. Verse 8, he says, also I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I collected for myself. So he's talking about taxation. He collected from people. Get this. Solomon received in taxes alone. This is staggering. 25 tons of gold and treasure. Taxes alone. 25 tons. 25 tons. Does that resonate? Do you understand how much wealth this guy had? In fact, because of all of his wealth, he could do number 7 here, and that's he could experience extravagant pleasures. Notice, verse 8, I provided for myself male and female singers. Some of you think that, the iPhone was a great invention with the iTunes. I mean, what do you think if you just stand up and say, hey, how about sing me this song? I want this song. Wake up in the middle of the night and say, this is the song I want to hear. So he has singers following him around, listening to him, following him around. Not only that, but he had concubines for his own pleasure. I mentioned this last week. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 3 tells us that King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's 1,000 people. I come from a small town of 2,500 people. That's almost half of the people who are in my hometown, made up of wives and concubines. For his pleasure, whatever he wanted, it was there. He could have pleasure in whatever way. Here it is, have pleasure. Enjoy. Enjoy. Here's your pleasure. Listen to the assessment of his life in verse 9. Then I became great, and I increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. Whatever he wanted, whatever he desired, he took hold of it. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. Nothing. My heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. I did all of this. I experienced it. I had more available to me than anybody could conceive. Do you think that Solomon would look back on his life and he would say, if I just knew that I made a difference in my world, I would be satisfied? Do you really think that he would have the same assessment of the person who wrote the article that I mentioned to you at the very beginning, that if I just made a difference in my world, if I just left my fingerprint on society around me, I would know satisfaction? Here's his conclusion. Thus I considered all of my activities which my hands had done and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind. All was vanity. And there was no profit under the sun. Everything that I put my hand to, I now look back on and I say it was vanity, it's a vapor, it's fleeting, and it ultimately had no profit under the sun. Wow. That's quite an assessment. Now, it's very important for us to understand. We were not made to experience ultimate satisfaction from the things in this world. That's the problem. We think that we find satisfaction from the things in this world. We were not made for that. We're not made for that. We will never find satisfaction from the things in this world. The pleasures of this world will leave us empty. We will have an empty tank. We will get up every morning wanting to experience satisfaction, and at the end of the day, we say, I'm not going to find it, only to get up the next morning and think that it's just right around the corner. If I just do this different, I can find satisfaction. What does the Bible have to say about satisfaction? The beautiful thing is that the Bible is filled with promises of satisfaction. There are all kinds of promises that we have in the Bible about satisfaction. Here's the good news. Satisfaction is available for all who are dissatisfied. Satisfaction is available for everyone who's dissatisfied. Satisfaction can be achieved. The Bible, once again, is full of glorious promises of satisfaction for those who are discontent. Our problem is not seeking pleasure. Our problem is seeking pleasure outside of our relationship with God. That's where we get in trouble. You see, we were built to worship God, not the stuff that God provides. And we want to worship that and find satisfaction there. But it will never deliver. Listen to these statements from the Bible about satisfaction. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. I am the one that satisfies. I am the bread of life. You will not hunger with me. You will not thirst with me. Psalm 107 verse 9, for he satisfies the longing soul, and the hungry soul he fills with good things. Do you think we're people who have deep desires to be satisfied? The gospel, the Bible teaches us that God and God alone satisfies the hungry soul. Psalm 22 verse 26, the afflicted shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek him shall praise the Lord. May your hearts live forever. Seek God, be satisfied. And I love this one. Thomas read it for us earlier this morning, the beginning of our gathering, Psalm 16:11. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. You want to know satisfaction? Satisfaction comes by knowing God. By knowing God, you can know satisfaction. Apart from that, you cannot know satisfaction. So the one question I have for us this morning, application question, is Jesus your greatest treasure? Now don't be so quick to answer that question, because there will be a lot of people that will say, absolutely, Jesus is my greatest treasure. But the only problem is you're not seeking after Jesus as if he is your greatest treasure. For many people, Jesus is like an add-on weekend excursion. You can't add Jesus on to your weekend and call him your greatest treasure. It's incompatible with what the Bible teaches. And I love you too much to allow you to go through life seeking your greatest treasure in other things outside of Jesus. I'm accountable to tell you that your greatest treasure will come, and it will only come through your relationship with Jesus. Is he your greatest treasure? Now, I'm not talking about coming down at some kid Bible camp and praying a prayer. I'm talking about walking with Jesus, knowing him as your greatest joy. That's where we're being pushed by Solomon. Solomon is looking forward to the coming of the Messiah. And we have the opportunity to see the Messiah, to see what he has done, and to see him in his glory through the gospel. Do you know Jesus? Is he your greatest treasure? Is your heart satisfied in Christ? My prayer is this morning that if you do not know Jesus as your greatest treasure, that you would know him, that you would walk with him, that he would not be a weekend excursion add-on, some sort of an addendum at the end of the week, but he would be the pursuit of your everyday.